A software engineer outside Austin makes $180,000 a year, leases a BMW X5, and panicked in October when his water heater failed, and the repair bill came to $2,200. 2 blocks away, a retired teacher living on a pension has a net worth past $1 million. When her transmission went out last spring, she paid it and kept walking. We assume the engineer is the wealthier one. He earns more than most of the country ever will. But right now, roughly 4 in 10 households earning over $100,000 a year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Income and wealth quietly stopped, meaning the same thing. So what actually separates someone who looks rich from someone who is rich? The difference isn't the salary. It's a set of quiet habits that show up long before anyone checks a bank statement. And that's what this video is about. Miss them, and you can spend an entire career earning well while still feeling like the floor could give out at any moment. My name is Alex, and if you've done everything right on paper and still feel behind, stick around, because the gap has almost nothing to do with your paycheck. I'm going to show you the 10 specific signs that separate real money from a big salary and the math behind each one. Once you see these patterns, you'll stop guessing at your own progress and start reading your finances the way wealthy people already do. That pattern shows up first in the smallest possible moment, the day something breaks. Emergency bills, don't rattle them. Here's a strange fact. The size of someone's panic when something breaks tells you more about their finances than their job title ever could. Have you ever noticed that? Watch what happens when life throws the ordinary curveballs. The transmission gives out on the highway. The dog gets into something at the park, and the emergency vet bill on a Sunday reads $3,000. Or the water heater in the basement fails the week before Thanksgiving, and now there's a plumber, a wet vac rental, and a house full of relatives arriving in 4 days. For most households, that moment is pure adrenaline, and the numbers explain exactly why. Currently, roughly 1 in 3 American households couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing the money, charging a card, or selling something to come up with it. $400, not $4,000. Sit with that for a second, because it means the version of the story above, the vet bill, the water heater, isn't a minor inconvenience for most people. It's a full-blown financial event. So when a bill like that lands, where does the money actually come from? For a lot of households, it lands on a credit card, at whatever rate is available, which right now averages just over 22% on balances that carry month to month. That's not a rounding error. That's the bill getting more expensive every single month it isn't paid off. Now here's where it gets interesting, because someone with real money reacts to the exact same bill completely differently. Take Renee, a dental hygienist in Cincinnati. When her car needed a $2,000 repair this past winter, she told me it barely registered. She didn't check her credit limit. She didn't feel her stomach drop. It was, in her words, just a Tuesday. That flat, almost bored response isn't luck, and it isn't a bigger paycheck sitting behind her either. Renee makes a completely ordinary income. It's a specific habit. She keeps a real emergency fund, usually 3 to 6 months of expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account instead of a regular checking account. And here's the detail that almost nobody checks. The national average savings account, the default kind you get at Chase or Bank of America if you never think twice about it, currently pays around 0.4%. On $10,000, that's about $38 a year, less than a tank of gas. Meanwhile, a high-yield account at an online bank like Ally, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, or SoFi is currently paying somewhere close to 4%. Same $10,000, around $400 a year instead of $38. Same banking system, same FDIC insurance. 10 times the return because one of those banks is actually competing for your deposit, and the other one knows you'll probably never move your money anyway. That's not a small oversight. That's thousands of dollars over a decade, sitting in an account earning almost nothing, for no reason other than nobody ever asked the question. So the emergency fund isn't really about the emergency. It's about what it does to the rest of your financial life. When a broken water heater can't touch your rent money or your retirement contribution, you stop making decisions out of fear. You stop the cycle where 1 bad month turns into 3 bad months. Renee's calm wasn't a personality trait. It was a decision she made years before that bill ever showed up. And once that kind of cushion exists, it tends to show up in other places too, starting with something as ordinary as what's sitting in the driveway. Their car and card stay boring. Quick question, If you had to guess someone's net worth just by looking at their car, how confident would you actually be? Most of us would guess higher for the nicer car, and most of us would be wrong. This is where people get fooled the most, because we've all been trained to read an expensive car as proof of money. Very often, it's the opposite signal entirely. The average new car payment in America just hit a record high, $770 a month, according to the most recent data from Experian. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now runs over $1,000 a month, and most of those aren't even for anything glamorous. They're ordinary trucks and SUVs financed over longer and longer terms. Now run the math that someone with real money runs almost automatically. Take that $770 payment and imagine investing it instead, every month for 30 years, at a historical average return of 8%. It grows into roughly $1.15 million. Let that sink in. The car payment was never really a car payment. It was a $1 million decision, quietly handed over to a piece of metal that starts losing value the moment it leaves the lot. And financing it isn't free either. Borrow the average amount for a new car right now, a little under $44,000, at today's average new car rate. And over a typical 6-year loan, you'll pay close to $9,000 in interest. Real money for the privilege of owning something that's worth less every single day you own it. Take Douglas, a general contractor in Phoenix who's never once leased a car in his life. His neighbor drives a Mercedes-Benz GLE on a $1,000 a month lease. Douglas drives a Toyota Camry he bought 3 years ago with cash, and nobody on his street would guess he's the one with 7 figures in a brokerage account. That's not an accident. In a widely cited study tracking over 10,000 American millionaires, 84% pointed to one specific habit as a reason they built real wealth. They never had a car payment at all. The credit card in someone's wallet tells the same story, just quieter. In that same study, nearly 3 out of 4 millionaires said they've never carried a credit card balance in their entire lives, not once, ever. Compare that to the country as a whole, where the average rate on a balance that carries month to month currently sits at just over 22%. Carry $5,000 on a card at that rate for a year, and you'll hand over more than $1,100 in interest. Money that buys you absolutely nothing. Here's the thing though, people like Douglas aren't avoiding credit cards. He uses one constantly for the points, the purchase protection, the 2% back on gas and groceries. The difference is the balance hits zero every single month without fail. The card works for him. For most people, it quietly works against them, one minimum payment at a time. So look at those two ordinary, visible choices again. The car sitting in the driveway, and the balance sitting on last month's statement. Neither one requires anyone to check a bank account or ask an awkward question at a dinner party. They're just sitting there in plain sight, and once you know how to read them, they're two of the most reliable signals there are. But the car and the card only tell you what someone isn't doing. The far more interesting question is what they're doing instead with all that money they didn't hand over to a dealership or a credit card company. Their money works without them. What if I told you the richest person you know might be sitting perfectly still right now, doing absolutely nothing and getting paid for it? That's not a riddle. That's just how the deepest kind of wealth actually works, and it's almost invisible from the outside. A high earner trades hours for dollars, sometimes a lot of dollars, but the moment they stop working, the income stops right along with them. Someone with real money has quietly built the opposite arrangement. Their money earns money on its own, around the clock, whether they're at the office, asleep, or on a beach in the Florida Keys, ignoring their phone entirely. Here's what that actually looks like with real numbers. Take $100,000, invest it, and leave it alone at an average 8% return. In 20 years, it doesn't just grow, it becomes roughly $466,000 without another single dollar added. That's the whole idea behind what people call passive income. Though honestly, the word passive undersells it. It skips right over the years of unglamorous saving it takes to build that engine in the first place. Take Kevin, an HVAC technician outside Nashville, who's never once cracked 6 figures in his career. For 2 decades, he funneled every raise and every tax refund into index funds instead of upgrades. No boat at the marina, no fresh set of golf clubs, no new truck every 3 years. By his early 50s, the income his investments were quietly throwing off had passed what his actual job paid him. His coworkers assumed he was underpaid his whole career. In a sense, he was. because he was already financially free while still clocking in every morning. So, what's the actual mechanism underneath Kevin's story? It comes down to one simple sorting rule. An asset puts money into your pocket over time. A liability pulls money right back out. That's really the whole distinction. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. An index fund, a rental property, a small stake in a local business, a dividend paying stock, those send money back toward you month after month, year after year, whether you lift a finger or not. A boat sitting unused at a marina, a third 85-inch television for the man cave, a closet full of things that lost value the second they left the store. Those are liabilities wearing a costume of success. And here's the part that tends to surprise people most. In that same study of over 10,000 American millionaires, about 75% pointed to regular, consistent investing over a long stretch of time as the actual reason they built wealth. Not one of them ranked picking some hot stock as a top reason. Not one. Instead, they bought broad, boring, low-cost index funds, the kind that simply track the S&P 500, and added to them every single month like clockwork. Then they did the single hardest thing in all of finance. Nothing. Through corrections. Through years when the headlines swore were different this time. They just stayed invested. Want to see how far even a modest version of that goes? $500 a month, invested at 8%, becomes about $745,000 over 30 years. You'd have personally put in $180,000 of that. The other $565,000 is just time, quietly doing work no job ever could. That's the engine. But an engine this powerful doesn't run itself. It needs fuel showing up on a schedule before anyone gets the chance to spend it first. Savings move before they can spend it. Here's a question worth sitting with. If your paycheck could talk, would it tell you where it's actually going or where you meant for it to go? For most people, those are two very different answers. Most households spend first and save whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month. And the brutal truth is, there's almost never anything left. Wealthy households flip that entire order on its head. The money is already spoken for before it ever lands in checking. They slice into a 401k, which this year the IRS allows up to $24,500 in employee contributions, another slice into a Roth IRA, another into an ordinary brokerage account, all of it automated, all of it gone before it can be casually spent on a Friday night out or a spur-of-the-moment weekend trip. Here's the single fact that should change how you look at your own paycheck for good. Your savings rate matters more than your salary does. Run the comparison, and it almost doesn't seem fair. A median earner making $60,000 a year who saves 20%, $12,000 annually at 7%, ends up with more than $1.1 million after 30 years. A high earner pulling in $150,000 who only manages to invest $4,500 a year lands around $425,000 over that same stretch. The lower earner wins by a landslide. The only thing that changed was behavior. That gap is exactly why the national numbers look the way they do. The current U.S. personal savings rate sits at only around 4.5%, and right now, roughly 4 in 10 households earning over $100,000 a year still describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Income alone was never the deciding variable. It never is. Take Whitney, a pharmacist in Salt Lake City, who's never made a dramatic income by pharmacist standards. Her system isn't complicated. The day her paycheck lands, a fixed percentage moves automatically into her 401k and her brokerage account before she's even opened her banking app. She told me once that she genuinely doesn't know what her paycheck feels like in full because she's never actually held all of it at once. That's not deprivation, that's the whole strategy. And that automated system runs on a second habit sitting right underneath it, living on less than you make on purpose. In that same study of over 10,000 American millionaires, 94% said they live on less than they earn, and protecting that gap means saying no, often and without much drama. For Whitney, that's skipping the destination bachelorette weekend in Nashville when a coworker organizes one. It's sitting through a timeshare pitch at a Marriott Vacation Club property in Orlando and calmly saying it's not for her. It's packing lunch 3 days a week out of a cooler bag her flashier coworkers gently tease her about. Here's the thing worth noticing, though. None of this required willpower in the moment. That's actually the entire point. When the transfer fires off automatically on payday, there's no window where you get to talk yourself out of it. No moment of temptation, no negotiation with yourself at 11 at night. The account you never touch is the one that quietly turns into your freedom, one automatic transfer at a time, whether you're paying attention to it or not. So the money shows up to work on schedule, and it earns while you're not looking. But what's the actual point of building an engine like that in the first place? It's not to watch a number get bigger forever. They spend money to buy time. Here's a question almost nobody asks correctly. If you ask someone with real money what they're actually saving for, how many of them would say more stuff? Almost none. And that's the part that catches people off guard. Ask someone with real money what the money is actually for, and the answer is almost never a bigger house or a nicer watch. Not even something like a Rolex Submariner sitting in a drawer, barely worn. The answer, almost every time, is time itself. Think about what that actually means in practice. It's the freedom to walk away from a job that's been quietly grinding someone down for years. It's taking a random Tuesday off with no explanation needed for anyone. It's sitting at a kid's soccer game in the middle of a workday without running the cost of missing work through your head the entire time. Take Desmond, a mechanical engineer who spent 15 years building a small HVAC repair business in Tampa. The moment his investments could reliably cover his family's core expenses, he didn't go out and buy a boat or trade his truck in for something flashier. He cut his own work week down to 4 days and started coaching his son's Little League team on Thursday afternoons. Nobody at the ball field knew what he was worth. Nobody needed to. That's the entire point. Here's the thing worth sitting with for a second. Past a certain point, money stops being about buying more and starts being about removing friction. The overdraft warning, the late fee notice, that low, constant hum of dread that follows anyone who's one bad month away from real trouble. Buying that dread out of your life, permanently, is worth more than almost anything that could sit on a shelf or hang in a garage. And isn't that strange when you think about it? We spend years chasing bigger paychecks, assuming the payoff at the end is a bigger house, or a nicer car, or a vacation somewhere impressive enough to post. But talk to enough people who actually have money, and the thing they protect hardest isn't any of that. It's an ordinary Tuesday morning with nothing scheduled and nowhere they have to be. This is also the part that never shows up online, because it genuinely can't be photographed. You can't post a picture of an unhurried afternoon. You can't capture not checking your phone during dinner in a way that gets likes. So the people who've actually built this kind of freedom tend to look, on the surface, almost exactly like everyone else. Same neighborhood, same grocery store, same worn-out minivan in the driveway probably. But watch closely, and you'll start to notice it. It's in how unhurried certain people are with their own days, how little they seem to be selling, proving, or performing for anyone watching. Desmond isn't rushing to the next thing, because there isn't a next thing he's chasing. He already has what he was actually working toward the entire time. That's the part that makes the whole list make sense, honestly. The emergency fund, the boring car, the zero balance, the automatic transfers nobody has to think about. None of it was ever about the money itself. It was about buying back hours, days, entire unhurried Tuesdays, one quiet decision at a time. The bigger paycheck was never really the goal. It was just the raw material. So if that's what the money is actually for, here's a harder question worth asking yourself. If someone sat across from you and asked how you're really doing financially, what number would you even reach for first? They track net worth, not salary. Try this the next time you're at a barbecue. Ask someone how they're doing financially, and count how many seconds it takes before they mention a number that has a year attached to it. Almost everyone answers with income, and that single habit might be the most telling one on this entire list. Ask most people how they're doing, and they'll tell you their salary. This much a year, this raise, this number that showed up on the offer letter. Ask someone with real money the exact same question, and they think in a completely different currency. They think in net worth. Everything they own minus everything they owe. And here's the part that stands out. They usually know that number within a few $1,000s at almost any given moment, without having to check anything. Why does that matter so much? Because income is just water pouring into a tub. It looks impressive while it's flowing, but net worth is what's actually still sitting in that tub after everything else has drained back out. The rent, the car payment, the credit card interest, the $700 nobody remembers spending. One of those numbers measures effort. The other one measures what the effort actually turned into. Take Odell, a union electrician outside Pittsburgh who retired 2 years ago. He could tell you his net worth to the nearest few $1,000s without pausing to think. But mention his old salary, and he genuinely gets a little uncomfortable. Like you asked something slightly rude. In his mind, the paycheck was never really the point. It was just the raw material he spent 30 years turning into something that actually lasts. For a little context on where that leaves most people, the median American household currently holds a net worth of about $193,000, according to the most recent Federal Reserve survey on the subject. Cracking the top 10% nationally currently takes a net worth somewhere close to $2 million. Compare that to income, where the top 10% nationally starts around $250,000 a year. Those two numbers don't move together nearly as closely as most people assume. Plenty of high earners never build much net worth at all. Plenty of net worth millionaires never had a headline-worthy salary. Isn't that a strange thing to sit with? We spend our 20s and 30s treating the paycheck like the scoreboard. It's the number on LinkedIn, the number that decides which apartment you can afford, the number people quietly compare at reunions. But it was never actually the score. It was just the fuel. The people who understand that early tend to end up obsessively tracking what they keep, rather than what they earn. And the people who do that consistently end up keeping more and more of it, almost as a side effect. Meanwhile, the people fixated purely on income tend to watch it flow right back out the door, year after year, quietly wondering where it all went. Not because they're careless, just because nobody ever told them income was the wrong number to be watching in the first place. So here's where all 10 of these signs actually land. None of them, on their own, prove much. A boring car doesn't make someone wealthy. A tidy emergency fund doesn't either. But stack them together, the calm reaction to a bad bill, the paid-off Camry, the automatic transfer nobody thinks twice about, the number they'd rather discuss than their salary. And you're not looking at luck anymore. You're looking at a pattern. And once you can actually see the pattern, it's very hard to unsee it. The quiet math that was always working. Real money was never the number printed on a paycheck. It's the distance between what comes in and what actually stays. And that distance is what buys the calm you feel sitting across from certain people. None of the 10 signs are loud on their own. A paid-off Honda Accord doesn't prove anything by itself. Neither does a full emergency fund or a credit card statement sitting at zero. But together, they trace one pattern. Money that works without you. Debt that stays boring. Savings that move before you can spend them. And a number you track that has nothing to do with your job title. So the next time a bill surprises you, or a coworker leases something you can't quite afford, ask yourself which side of that pattern you're actually building toward. There's still one question this doesn't answer. Why almost nobody teaches any of this early enough for it to matter. That's exactly where I'm headed next. The money lessons school never gave any of us, and what a decade head start would have actually been worth. If any of these 10 hit close to home, tell me which one down in the comments, and which one you're still working on.